Hello, hello. Welcome back. It's time for another episode of Leading a Woman in Tech. And today we're talking about effective cross-department communication. If you've ever felt frustrated because different departments in your company don't seem to be on the same page, this episode's for you. Perhaps you've experienced the chaos of misaligned goals, miscommunications, derailing those all-important projects. If so, you are not alone. This is probably one of the things I talk to most executives about fairly early on in any coaching conversation, is tackling this frustration with misaligned departments, a frustration that your peers who are heading up another department just don't seem to share the same goals, even though you're in the same company. So today I want to dig into the barriers when you have cross-departmental collaboration, also who you should be collaborating with. And you might be surprised some of the people that I think you should be collaborating with. And we're going to give you some practical strategies for building bridges, enhancing clarity in the way you understand those other departments, but also create a culture where you and your team have seamless communication. Now, if you were in a very toxic culture, you might be thinking there's just no hope here, but I want you to pay attention because every single person can learn something from this episode. Even the most difficult companies and the most difficult teams I have seen learn something. And it might then be that it's then time to move on, but sometimes it's just the catalyst you need to make a change. So without further ado, let's dive on in. If you are a leader, cross-department communication is not a nice to have. It's vital. If you want your company, your organization to thrive, every business unit needs to be operating in synergy. That's how you ensure that everyone is working towards the same goals. Now, most of the time, the CEO worries about this. But actually, the further up you go, the more you need to worry about it. And I'd say you need to start worrying about this at director level. Some directors worry about this more than others. If you are going far in your career, I would say the earlier you start worrying about this, the better. This is about ensuring that the skills, perspectives are in sync. The company needs to be in sync, driving collaboration, making sure innovation is happening across the company, more efficient processes. You're not pulling at each other, instead you're leading in the same direction. That's how you create great overall performance. When you do this, there's immediate project success. When you learn how to have this interdepartmental communication that's clear and consistent, morale goes up, risk of errors goes down. You have this unity, this sense of purpose that's consistent, trust and transparency, and therefore psychological safety go up. It is exhausting working with a partner in another business unit and you feel you can't trust them. They do what they want. They go behind your back. They aren't on the same page. But even worse than that is when you're not even in touch with a potential partner who could be helping your team. So I want you to work on this so you build this long-term success and also company resilience. When you have this ability to have this great cross-department communication, everybody up levels because you are working on the same thing. You're singing from the same hymn sheet. Finance is getting the right data to help every department. HR is supporting every department. Engineering is listening to sales and marketing and customer success. Product is getting relevant data from sales and customer success and actually using it to drive engineering projects, but while still listening to engineering. And I know one of the most common things I talk about is with clients is engineering and product butting heads. I think that's just the tip of the iceberg. I really do. Like so many engineering and product teams butt heads, but they can also operate beautifully together. So I want to understand, first of all, why do so many of us have trouble with another department? Take a moment and ask yourself, what is the challenge you have with another department that you collaborate with, or maybe you wish you should collaborate with, but you just can't? Where's the tension? Where does it feel like you're pulling in different directions instead of working together? Is it varied communication styles? Is it jargon? I always talk about inner speak. A lot of the time we have an inner speak with our teams. It's full of jargon and shortcuts, just common understanding. We use this when communicating with our team. But when we use this outside our team, that's our peers, other business units, our bosses, because remember, the further up we go, the more likely it is our boss has never done our job, right? And that's a common one. If you have just leveled up in your career, you've just been promoted, started in a new company where your boss is at a higher level than you, have they ever done your job, or have they ever done your job in the most recent past? If not, you've got to make sure you're not using your inner speak. We need to develop an outer speak. This is required when communicating with other teams. When we do this, we avoid misunderstandings and frustrations. Now, you can control this for yourself, but is this part of the problem you're getting from another team? Are they just using lots of jargon and you're like, I kind of understand because they throw it around, but they just kind of miss a lot of concepts, or they don't want to dig into stuff with you? When we have that, there's a misalignment, a lack of shared understanding. And part of what we have to do is build that shared dialogue so that we can understand that we're all genuinely working in the same direction. It's worth looking at where the specific barriers are. Have you got some poor relationships? Where do the tensions exist? Where are your team saying, I don't get on with that person over there? Is it always a similar team? Is it always a particular personality type? Is it the same for your entire team, or is it just for one or two individuals? Where does your team feel stifled or tripped up by another department? I worked with a lady a few years ago who, head of engineering, had an amazing relationship with her peer who was head of product. Amazing. And this is one of those times when I was like, it is so nice to have engineers and product getting on. It was beautiful. I spent a lot of time coaching engineers or product leaders so that they do get on. But these two, they just got on, but their teams weren't getting on. And the problem was they were getting on so well, these two leaders, I was coaching one of them, that they didn't take the time to educate their teams on how to work together. And sometimes the head of engineering and the head of product should not be in the room, right? Actually, more often than not, the people lower down should be in the room together. There's got to be an opportunity for them to learn how to communicate. So pay attention to that. Pay attention also to when you over-explain something. Another favorite of mine is, are you externally processing your ideas? Early in our career, external processing, where we talk out loud as we chew through a problem, is powerful. It's why we love to get in a room with somebody and like whiteboard something out, right? But here's the thing. When this person is not an expert in what you do, you should not be doing that. So if they're in a different business unit, you should not be doing that. More to the point, your team should not be doing that. You might have learned this because you've risen up the ranks. If you haven't, learn it right now, my love. Like, it's time. Like, watch out for external processing. Are you chewing through ideas in front of people, including your boss? You should not be. Leaders don't have the ability to do that. You have to do it with people who understand what you do. Your boss is unlikely to be that person. Your peers are definitely not those people, right? Unless they do the same job as you. So you need to watch out for external processing, and you need to train your team to not externally process as well. Now, you can't stop another team doing that, but if you can get your team in check, others are going to learn by example. Notice if people's eyes glaze over with indifference. That's a classic for you're externally processing, or you've gone off topic, or you're losing lots of jargon. And yes, even on Zoom, that's why I'm such an advocate of having cameras on Zoom. Watch out for that glazed eyes. Look out for other reactions. Any indicator that is this person's just not engaged anymore, especially if it's more than one person. As soon as you can understand those barriers, whether it's jargon, external processing, lack of relevant information, too big picture or too much detail, relevance is really, really key. But as soon as you understand that, you're starting to recognize the common challenges. You're starting to identify specific issues with your organization that you can implement tactics and strategies to improve cross-department communication. And then you get that better collaboration and a more effective and positive work environment. So once you've done that, what can we do with it? So the first thing is communication. If you can, standardization is a great thing. I know it sounds boring, right? But if different teams are operating in different ways, it's very, very frustrating, especially when there's no common policy on how to handle urgent and important. This is a classic that trips up a lot of interdepartment collaboration. Sales thinks everything they do is urgent. Engineers are like, no, we've got this whole backlog of work to do. We have to work on that first, right? It's a classic point of tension. There has to be a common understanding of urgent and important. Now, engineering teams are actually quite good at solving this problem in that they'll often put together a help desk situation where things that are coming in are dealt with by a help desk. There's a certain number of people put on that help desk. The tension then becomes, why have you not got more people? This wasn't answered fast enough. You've got 30 people doing that stuff over there. Why are they not doing my thing, right? That's a communication challenge. But engineering is one department and they sort of have an authority to do that because of the nature of their work. But I'm saying you need to have an understanding of how urgent and important things are happening or dealt with so that it doesn't derail everything in your team and cause resentment and frustration. Similarly, when you ask me, and again, project is classic for this, like this has to be done yesterday, causes a lot of resentment. There needs to be more warning. Nothing should ever be unexpected, in my opinion, unless it's a genuine fire, and they should be very, very rare. But so many of us work in organizations where fires come up every single day. So part of the work that needs to be done here to improve cross-functional communication and collaboration is to understand, is this really urgent and important? Who's making that decision? Why is it? Like, what are the parameters? And then also communication platforms and like practices on those platforms. Because it might be that you have Slack and email. Some teams use Slack exclusively and there's an expectation you're on Slack. Some teams use email exclusively and there's an expectation you're on email. Some teams, they don't use either exclusively, but there's an expectation that you're doing deep work for half the day. Part of the frustration with interdepartmental collaboration comes from, this is urgent and important, but you didn't answer me. So there has to be a common communication platform and understanding of when a particular solution is used. And I think the classic is something like Slack or Teams for IM, and then email solutions. And then there's like the more asynchronous stuff like wikis and like how do you do all this? How can you streamline your interactions, ensure everyone is on the same page about how to use those tools? Get guidelines. Standardization is key. When do you use instant messaging, or when do you use email? When do you get on a video call? Trying to understand what everybody needs and the check-in opportunities, ways you're going to align and ensure people are up to date. That doesn't have to be a meeting, by the way. Like, I'm a big believer in getting rid of meetings. Any updates should be asynchronous. The meeting should be for problem solving, but that needs to be an expectation that is set. There needs to be this routine for these meetings to foster that culture of openness, collaboration, and a robustness in how you all work together. When you do that, when you implement a cohesive communication framework that everybody's on board with, suddenly things become more harmonious overnight. Even if you don't work on inner speak and outer speak and external processing, suddenly just having an understanding of this is how to raise an exception, this is what to do if it's urgent and important, this is how we respond, can make all the difference. I am a big believer in doing this as leaders anyway. I will tell my clients, you need to be out of your communication more, but you need to tell your team when you are online and how to raise an exception. So maybe you only check Slack and email 4 times a day. Great. Tell your team when that's likely to be. Tell your team what to do if there's something urgent that comes up. There should be a way to contact you that maybe has to go through a gatekeeper for something urgent and important. Because if you're always in the weeds checking stuff, you're not getting any deep work done. So it's just a great tool to have, but you have to set that expectation with everybody, not just your team. But when you've got that groundwork for how to use communication channels, when to raise exceptions, like once you've got that, then you need to create a culture and an environment where communication is encouraged. And this is the final blocker, right? Particularly if there's been tension in teams. You can have great communication skills, no jargon, but if there's a culture of we don't talk to each other, and your colleagues don't share information, there's a lot of judgment, there's no open door policies, there's no town halls, there's no safe space. You need to create a safe space for your team, a safe space for the other team, a safe space to have difficult conversations. You need to address things promptly You need to make sure your peers who are responsible for a collaborating team are also addressing things promptly. You need to have a shared understanding of how that works. The pair of you need to have an understanding of your team can escalate things either side and the two of you can hash it out. Over time, hopefully, the teams will operate together really well without you. That's always our goal, right? Always make yourself redundant so you level up, right? But initially, your teams need to feel that they have a space to voice their thoughts, provide feedback, get coaching on how to work with their peer team. And you need to work with your peer in order to make sure that's happening on their side as well. So look at how to do that, like team building activities, social events, town halls, informal interactions, networking opportunities. And yes, all of this can be done remotely as well. I know many of us are going back to the office, but everything can be done remotely. So don't use that as an excuse. But make sure you understand the needs and priorities of other teams. This one is a game changer. What keeps the other teams awake at night? Not just the leaders, but the other team members. What are the pressing concerns of your team? You probably know that one really well. Now communicate that. Bring you and your peer together and say, like, this is what we worry about. This is why we always push the urgent button on this. And then ask for them to say the same thing. And suddenly you'll get this understanding, commonalities, differences in priorities that are causing these tensions, but then you can address them. Encourage your team to be mindful of what the other team wants to discuss, because that is where communication falters if there's not that shared understanding. When you raise this understanding of what's keeping another team awake at night, you will suddenly be able to put yourself in their shoes. One of the things I do in my coaching is I bring together groups of women leaders. All of you are in tech, but often you're in different kind of functions, whether you're in engineering, your sales, your marketing, your HR, your, just run out of words, legal. Just trying to think, like, we've had people almost in every aspect, right? Operations, program management, whatever you want to call it. When you bring together those women into a group, and we do this all the time, they're not in the same company, but they're a similar level. So maybe they're all senior directors, and we bring them together in a coaching group. And everybody in our coaching groups gets to ask questions relevant to them. And then you get to watch other women being coached. The amount of understanding that comes from hearing, oh, that's what keeps sales awake at night. I thought it was just speaking to people. But that frustrates you? That's something that engineers do in your company? Yeah, we do that too, right? Like, suddenly, that level of understanding and empathy just skyrockets, and then you can turn your hand to solving that problem. Clear communication, empathetic communication. That is the bedrock of success in terms of collaboration. But to do that, you've got to understand. You've got to be on the same page. Which brings me to my next point. Aligning goals and objectives. It is astonishing to me how many companies don't seem to have alignment. There might be, if you're lucky, a company strategy. But when you look at the individual departments, there's like this complete disconnect between what they're doing. And the worst case is when one department's priorities are actually in conflict with another. I've seen teams bonused against each other where basically for this team to get their full bonus, this other team needs to do less well. And you're just like, no. So if you're listening to this and you have control of a company strategy, please look at this. But if you're listening to this and thinking, yeah, like I'm not sure our team strategies are really aligned, this is the next thing to work on. You need to understand shared goals. How are you working towards common objectives? Hopefully there is a common objective somewhere, but you need to explicitly tease this out. We're working on delivering this product. You're working on sales for this product. Okay, great, right? Or you are looking at supporting these kind of customers and we are working on this engineering topic. Okay, great. Now what? How do you promote a sense of unity so you're all moving the same direction rather than in this tension mode of pulling apart? Your role as a leader is to get clarity there and then provide that clarity to everybody, pass it down, facilitate, mediate, ensuring that all voices are heard, misunderstandings are addressed promptly. When you do that, again, you're going to provide more effective collaboration because you are suddenly on the same page. This is not rocket science, and yet so many companies don't do this. So I want you to teach your team how to understand what that keeps the other team awake. How to understand what that other team is prioritizing and why. How's that fit in with what your team's prioritizing and why? Then teach your team on how to communicate points clearly. Give them feedback. Be in a cross-functional meeting. And then at the end, set the expectation with your team that you're going to do a debrief on how to improve key messaging, avoid unnecessary details, avoid information overload. Say to your team, like, hey, we're going to be working on this as a team to improve our relationships and get more done. So we expect feedback from me. Do it in person or over Zoom. Don't do it by email. I've made that mistake. It's very, very hard to give effective feedback unless your team is really good at receiving feedback. It's very hard to do effective feedback asynchronously because it's so easy to misunderstand the tone of the written word. And I have misstepped there myself. So my advice would be until your team is, my current team is rock solid on feedback. They are very open to feedback backwards and forwards. And so we can do asynchronous feedback, but I've learned not to do it with a new start until they've kind of been indoctrinated into our philosophy as a company. Another one is practice active listening. I've talked about this so much, but you and your team need to actively listen. If you aren't actively listening to the other team, there's a lost opportunity for mutual understanding. So remember things such as paraphrase what the other person said, ask clarifying questions, make sure everyone's on the same page to reduce that risk of miscommunication. When you start doing that again and providing feedback, regularly reviewing and improving, things are just going to up level really, really quickly. I'd love to hear from you. What is it that you think you need to be doing more of? Even if you've got great collaboration with other teams, I bet there's an opportunity for improvement because there basically always is. So I'd love to know where you think you need to be working. How are you going to motivate your team here as well? Like, what is it that's going to help them understand that's worth putting some effort in here, or worth taking on your feedback here? I then want you to start implementing a systematic tracking process for tracking the effectiveness of communication across departments. I want you to celebrate the achievements that you and the other department achieve together as well. And from there, things are just going to be easier and calmer. So let me know. Reach out to me on LinkedIn anytime. Let me know what you've been trying. Let me know what's working. Let me know what's not working. And let me know if you want to hear more of this. And do me one more favor. Share this with another woman leader in tech. The more we can do this, the more our tech companies are going to succeed and thrive, and the more we as individuals succeed and thrive. So do the tech industry and other women around you a favor and share this episode to somebody who might just benefit from it. That's it for today. As always, remember, stay in your tech leadership game and follow your dreams, because the world really does need that uniqueness that you bring as a leading woman in tech.